A very good morning to you wherever you are watching us from. We are coming to you live from Parliament buildings in Nairobi this Wednesday morning, 6th day of March 2019. And in a short while, we shall be linking up with members of the National Assembly as they engage in matters of legislation. Wednesday is the day that they hold two sittings, one in the morning and another in the afternoon. The morning sitting, this one where we are at currently dedicated to private members' bills and motions, and this is the time that members get to prosecute and also deliberate on issues that they have presented right here in the House. This morning, two motions lined up for discussion. One sponsored by Honorable Didmas Baraza, Member of Parliament, Kimilili constituency, and this one speaks to development and implementation of regulations for management of fares charged by public service.
Settled land. I, the undersigned, on behalf of the residents of Sabaki Ward of Magarini constituency, draw the attention of the House to the following. That before independence, the residents of Sabaki Ward were forcibly evicted from the unsettled land and relocated by a colonial government to pave way for the establishment of a Kisima farm owned by a foreign national. That the forceful eviction and subsequent relocation was done without any compensation, despite the abandoned farms being rich in cash crops like cashew nuts, trees, coconut trees, mango trees, among others. That after independence, the Kenyan government repossessed Kisima farm, including the land, and invested it to the Agricultural Development Corporation, ADC, a state corporation, and later renamed Sabaki Farm. That with time, the once thriving livestock enterprise started to dwindle under the management of ADC. The local residents felt that this was a deliberate attempt to allow well-connected individuals to get easy access to the prime land. That the ADC management has illegally allocated the land to well-connected individuals and have them issued with title deeds. That the National Land Commission, via the letter dated 13th March 2015, addressed to the Kilifi County Commissioner, confirmed that ADC management was allocating land illegally to individuals. That residents who were evicted from Sabaki Ward ADC farm are currently squatters on land which is not arable. That efforts to have the matter resolved with relevant government agencies have been futile, and that the matter in respect of which this petition is raised is not pending in any court of law, constitutional or legal body. Therefore, your humble petitions pray that the National Assembly, through the Departmental Committee on Lands, that the government resettle the evicted people on the Sabaki ADC farm, which is their ancestral land. 2, causes the National Land Commission to investigate allocation of ADC Sabaki farm land, which with a view of revoking all the title deeds issued to individuals who were illegally allocated, and makes any other direction that it deems fit in the circumstances of this matter. And your petitions will ever pray. Thank you.
Very well. Now, I do not seem to see members' interest in this particular petition, because I advise, if there was any interest, I would be seeing it at the intervention slot. Therefore, I see there is one now. Honorable Mwambire Ngumbao.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I support the petition given by Honorable Michael King. Michael King is a brother and a neighbor. Mr. Speaker, these issues are very rampant in the coast region, whereby people have always been considering it as a cash cow for looters and grabbers. I believe the Committee on Lands are going to take serious measures, serious interventions in these issues, and we should get in the in-depth of the causes why the former government used to direct individuals in the coast region to grab such potential land. Mr. Speaker, this is a part and parcel of the historical injustices that we have been suffering for a very long time, which has been making people thinking that we don't even belong to Kenya because of such issues which have been happening. I highly believe that the Committee on Lands are going to take very, very serious measures, are going to come up with recommendations that will be adopted by the House so that these great people of Sabaki and the Magarini constituents can get somewhere to settle and send signals to even other parts of the coast region which have the same challenges. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Well, let's also have Honorable Chachuganya, member for North Hor.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to support this petition by Honorable Kingi. So, Speaker, sir, it's so sad that Kenyans, 50 years or more after independence, they are still quotas in their own land. So, Speaker, sir, now that we have a new constitutional dispensation, we have National Land Commission and other relevant authorities who can easily address this land crisis in this country. So, Speaker, sir, while many other Kenyans are enjoying thousands and acres of individual lands.
What is it, Honorable Gikaria?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Maybe it's just seeking some clarification. I'm not here to direct what the clerk's office should be doing. But, Honorable Speaker, in the last session, I did place 3 petitions which lapsed with the last session. And I renewed as advised. I renewed the 3 petitions again as advised by the clerk's office, which I did. But today, again, I've never seen them. I don't know what is it, because I had 3, one of which is about land matters. The other one is about the plane crash at Lake Nakuru. And the other one was about, can't remember exactly, but I need some advice, Honorable Speaker.
Have you revived them, Honorable Gikaria?
Yes, I did, and I did that immediately we came back to Parliament. I have given out all the 3 petitions to the clerk's office, and it is after the lapsing of the last year's session is when I was advised.
That makes perfect sense. You can kindly consult with the clerks at the table office. Okay. They will be able to advise and see how it can be fast-tracked. You make a lot of sense when you say that this is something that you had launched last session, and therefore we might consider giving it some priority so that it doesn't lapse again.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so next order.
Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
We don't seem to have statements on that particular order, so we will straight go to the questions. And we will start with a member for Emuhaya constituency, Honorable Mboko Milemba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this chance this morning to ask a question number 008 of 2019, and is directed to the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware of the alarming level of insecurity in Emuhaya constituency over the past 3 years, in particular in Esibuye, Esiruro, Kilingili, Ilungu, Mwichio markets, where killings, robberies, and burglaries have been on a steady rise, with the most recent incidents being the killing of 8 people by a gang that attacked Kilingili market. Kilingili is a confluence of 3 regions, also affecting Ikolomani, where Shinali comes from, and Sekamiradu from Hisero and Sabatia. And Ilungu markets on Saturday, 2nd March 2019. What measures, number 2, if any, has the ministry put in place to enhance insecurity in these areas? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. That one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security. And that was a private member's, a question by private notice. It was the only one. So we now go to the ordinary questions. The first shot will be given to Honorable Mushiri Nyaga, Member for Manyata.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to ask this question. And the question goes to the Cabinet Secretary for Industry, Trade and Cooperatives. Could the Cabinet Secretary give the status report of the Kenya Planters Cooperative Union, KPCU, in receivership by the Commercial Bank, KCB, including the debt owed to the receiver, if any? 2, details of the shareholding of each cooperative society under KPCU before the receiver manager took possession of the cooperative union. 3, the amount of money collected as revenue from tenants from the sale of KPCU property since the receiver manager took over. 4th, status of the unpaid terminal dues owed to former KPCU staff. 5th, the number of assets sold off by the bond and the amount of money received from such sales and the approving authority of the sale, and in particular, the sale of Kaunoki Coffee Estate. 6th, and the last one, the current value of KPCU and its total liabilities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. That one will be replied to before the committee, the Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. Next is Honorable Nelson Koech, member for Belgut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to ask question 078 of 2019 to the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Education. Could the Cabinet Secretary provide the number of requests received for registration of schools, both primary and secondary schools in the country, and whose consideration approval is pending? Number 2, are the measures by the Ministry to ensure that the registration process for schools is carried out without, are there measures by the Ministry to ensure that registration process for schools is carried out without undue delays? Thank you very much.
That one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Education. So we go to the next one by the member for Oljo Rock, Honorable Michael Mushira. Honorable Mushira, there is a problem with your mic, and I can see there is one to your left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm asking question number 079 of 2019, and the question is directed to the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury and Planning. Number 1, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that during the registration of mobile banking services, details of the next of kin of customers are not captured? And 2, what is usually the fate of funds belonging to the mobile banking services users in case they pass on? And number 3, are there plans to ensure that the said details are included during the registration of mobile banking services? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. That one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning. And next would have been Honorable Caleb Amisi, but I have been informed that he is away on official duties. So his question will come later. Now, let's have the Honorable Abdul Rahim Dawood, MP, member for North Imenti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the question number 081 of 2019, and my question is directed to the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development. Mr. Speaker, the first question is, when will the collapsed Gyaki Bridge in North Imenti be reconstructed? Number 2, what is the current status of the construction of the Coca-Cola, Kidirone, Kariene, Gaito, Gyaki Road being implemented by Messrs. Northern Construction Company Limited? Number 3, How much money was allocated for the construction of the said road, and what is the total amount paid to date? Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and this was a question I asked even last year, so I hope to get a reply this year.
Very well. So that will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. Next will be the member for Teso, South Constituency, Honorable Geoffrey Omuse.
Thank you, Honorable.
And I've had a lot of complaints about this in the city of Nairobi. And then you also have another problem where if you give not the exact amount, you give, let's say, 100 shillings, and your fare is 60. You're denied your change. And then by the time you reach your stop, you get off, and you've been robbed by the Matatu personnel. I feel that as a government, we have let the Matatu industry regulate itself. They've formed many organizations and associations, and I think they've tried, but they're failing Kenyans when they don't regulate fares. One should know exactly what it costs when you come on board and when you alight. And it should be the same for all Matatus all over the county and all over the country. The county of Nairobi has led by example, and I think it's because we have a governor, Governor Sonko, who was in the industry, so he understands. And there's going to be a lot of resistance because people will say it's an open market and we should allow forces to determine the price. But when it comes to public transport, transport used by many commuters in Kenya, we cannot allow it to rogue traders. It is totally unfair for you not to know what something costs. Another thing that I think we should encourage the Matatu associations to do is to ensure that every Matatu provides a receipt. Because once we come up with rules and regulations on pricing, then there has to be a receipt with the name of the Matatu so that you can actually be able to bring charges against a Matatu that does not comply with the pricing that the government will recommend. And I feel as a government, we cannot leave our people exposed to such abuse by the industry. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I second. Thank you.
Having been seconded, I propose a question which is aware that the road transport is the most widely used means of transportation in Kenya. Further aware that the Matatus, motor omnibuses, and buses provide services to millions of people a day are the backbone of Kenya's public road transport services, cognizant that the National Transport and Safety Authority Act is mandated by law to, among other things, come with conditions as it may consider fit for the purpose of ensuring that the fares imposed for carrying passengers are reasonable and ensure fair competition within the transport industry, concerned that the companies, associations, or saving and credit cooperative SACCOs, under whose umbrellas the said public service vehicles operate, and which are required to prescribe fares for its members, tend to take advantage of non-existent regulatory policies in the sector, thus prescribing exorbitant fares, which puts a lot of strain on customers. Further concerned that for a long time, commuters have suffered at the hands of merciless PSV crews who charge exorbitant fares, where on many routes, fares are hiked on reasons as flimsy as change of weather, forcing the commuters to spend more than what they intended to. This House resolves that the government develops and implements regulation on amount of fares charged by PSVs for their services to protect customers from exploitation. Well, I'll give the first shot to Honorable Rundikiri Murwidhania, member for Buuri. So we only have his card and not him. So then we will go to Honorable Manzo Gitonga.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute in this very, very important motion. And Mr. Speaker, I want to support it and agree with the mover and thank the Honorable Didmas Barasa for coming up with a very, very important motion. Mr. Speaker, in Nairobi alone, 6 million people utilize public transport every morning and every evening. And you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, a lot of people live below $1 a day or have a budget fare. And the moment there is a rain in an afternoon, the fare doubles from what they paid in the morning, and they have no choice. They are forced to pay that particular fare. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it amounts into robbery without violence, and sometimes with violence, Mr. Speaker, so to speak. And if you look at the whole transport network in the whole country, from Makueni constituency, Makueni County, to Mombasa, from Kisumu, every part of this world, Garissa, name it, there is a transport operator in action or charging a fare every single minute of the day. And for that matter, it is very important for there to have been regulations emanating from this act, the NTSA Act, which of course has had very many issues in the past parliaments, and we hope sometime it will be, amendments will originate from the organization or from the ministry in charge or from individual members, so that we can streamline this act first and foremost, and then regulations emanate from the act, because this is about the public, it's about the people of Kenya. And as it has been stated, the work of Parliament first is to represent the people, and secondly also to resolve issues affecting Kenyans. And in this particular one, every time fares are hiked either over Christmas or high season or when there is change of weather, Kenyans get affected in a big way.
Order, Honorable Amalwa. Order. Okay, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kenyans get affected in a big way, and for that matter, we owe them a duty as members of Parliament to make sure that this particular issue is resolved in a proper way and in a manner we protect them. And as the Honorable Pasaris have said, the member for Nairobi, women are the most affected in this case, and children, and all the people, such that the operator is safeguarded and the user is safeguarded, and even if fares were to be hiked for any reason, Mr. Speaker, then there is a limit of which cannot be exceeded, and a notice is given thereof such that any transporter knows when there are this sort of situations, then there is a likelihood of hiking. And if you hike, what is the amount which is now a Kenyan is being charged, Mr. Speaker? And especially when it comes to the implementation of the NTSA Act, Mr. Speaker, we have to make sure that this particular ministry originates with the regulations. They come to the Committee of Delegated Legislation. They are looked at. If the ministry debates with the committee, looks at the law, make sure that first and foremost the act complies with the Constitution, and the act itself is amended sufficiently so that now regulations can flow under the act to make sure that there is conformity and the regulations are not ultra-virus or are not above the law itself, so that, Mr. Speaker, we can be able to serve Kenyans, and we can be able as a House to protect Kenyans, and we can be able to represent them sufficiently. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support.
Very well. Honorable Chesire. Cheruyot Chesire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I want to really congratulate Honorable Dismas Barasa for having brought this motion today to this House. And it's like he heard what we were discussing in my house today with my son and my daughter. When actually they were asking me for fare, then I was asking them what happened with the money I gave you. Then they said, you know, Mom, when we came yesterday, the fares had been hiked and so forth. But it is true that the most affected people with these unregulated or controls of fare is the youth. It is youth, and more so again with women. Because our youth are the ones who are actually using this transport, public transport a lot, knowing that they go look for jobs. Some of them are going to schools, colleges, and this, by extension, is affecting the parents and guardians. So every morning, you have actually to check out some money, which you don't know what will happen during the day. The fares are not predicted, and this has really affected even the development of the country in terms of SMEs, because the women who are doing small businesses around are not also able to travel. They are not able. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is a lot of interruptions in the House. Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order, 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 order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. So I was actually saying that the regulation of the fares in this country is actually paramount. We really need it because at times somebody would have traveled in the morning with some estimate of money, and on the way or in the evening, she or he realizes that the fares have been hiked and the person has not enough money to pay. So it becomes a day in, day out hectic to the public. Mr. Speaker, sir, as many have put, this country, as much as we want to give people liberty to do business, we should be able also to protect the public, because it is our duty as we represent the people to see into it that the public are comfortable in using the means of ways where the private business people are providing them with services. The other factor, Mr. Speaker, sir, is as we look into controlling or regulating transport and fares in this country, it is also important to note that among other businesses that are affecting the public is also basic needs of the human being in this country. We have issues to do with rent. Rent is also a real issue because somebody wakes up in the morning, they just hike the rent, and the people are not able to pay. So that is one of the things also we need to consider. If we are to regulate transport, we have to look at regulating also house rents. We have to look at also regulating the basic food, maybe sugar, cooking oil. We also need to regulate maize flour. We regulate the basic things that we want. Among others are the hospital bills, electricity bills, and even the water bills, because these are things which are basic to everyone. Anything above that is a luxury. So to me, if we are to regulate transport, we should also look among other basic needs that need to be regulated so that at least the lives of the people becomes a bit manageable. So I must congratulate and support this motion that Honorable Didmas Barasa brought to this House today, and say that let's not only concentrate on transport, but we look at other sectors that surely affect our members of the public. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Now the next one will be Honorable Nyikal Wambura, member for Seme. And by the way, there is one which has been pressed there, and it will have a real impact on that member because he was supposed to be top also.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Professor Dr. Professor Oduol, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is an extremely important topic we're discussing today. And although going by the consultations that are going on in the House, we are not listening to it, but it is something we should look at. Mr. Speaker, there is total lack of order in that road transport sector. There is absolutely no regulation in spite of the existence and National Transport and Safety Authority Act.
Order. Honorable Professor Oduol, kindly press the intervention slot and let it remain there, because you have been removed from the position you are in.
Yeah. Profit-driven, and that is as it should be. It is the responsibility of the government to regulate the private sector to protect the interests of the citizens. Mr. Speaker, in the transport sector, we have left it to SACCOs to regulate themselves. Mr. Speaker, SACCOs are under a different law. I do not see how they can regulate the transport sector. And self-regulation must actually be accompanied by serious laws. Mr. Speaker, in this sector, there is no proper routing, whether it is within the cities or outside. Buses owners wake up in the morning and say, today I'm taking this. Mr. Speaker, we cannot go on like that. And Mr. Speaker, even if you look at the private sector on its own, the people who own the buses, the people who own the matatus, even at individual level, they have no management structures. What stops a bus owner or a matatu owner from hiring conductors and hiring drivers so that you have specific people assigned to a specific bus or a specific matatu so that if there is a problem later, you can track and say, it was this matatu at this time, this bus at this time. So, Mr. Speaker, it is really a total chaos. Mr. Speaker, if you look, the situation is even worse in the cities. And Mr. Speaker, if you look in this city, my colleagues here will know, some may not, some may not. All these numbers we have, Matatu number 11, number 12, number 28, these were things that were put in before independence. Mr. Speaker, since independence, nobody in this country or in this city has sat down to draw the routes that buses and matatus should follow in relation to the estates that come up. Mr. Speaker, there is no difference between the distribution of water, the distribution of electricity, and transport that people need. So we really must go in and look at how we organize the transport sector. In most countries, particularly in cities, even in the rural areas, public transport is either run by public entities or properly regulated with structures indicating what vehicle can be used for transport, what routes they take, where they disembark, what time they leave. There's even no timing. Mr. Speaker, some of us here may remember there were times when a bus left Nairobi going to Kisumu, it would be clear at this point it will be Naivasha, at this time it will be Nakuru, and so on. So you didn't have to keep policemen on the road to say they are overspeeding, because if they get to Nakuru before the time, obviously they are overspeeding. This was self-regulating arrangement. And Mr. Speaker, the National Transport and Safety Authority and ACTA there, all they do, Mr. Speaker, the last time I saw them, they were actually waving vehicles down on the road, taking the place of traffic police. What we expect them to do, Mr. Speaker, is to sit down, look at the country, look at the city and say, what structures do we need in Nairobi to move the people around? This is mass transport of people. You have to move people in a city. You have to move people across the country. Then if they put those regulations and they put those structures, then the traffic police will help them to adhere that. But we are not seeing that. So, Mr. Speaker, just recently, you remember, we actually rejected a bill on Nairobi Urban Transport Authority. Although issues were raised on its constitutionality in relation to the counties around Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, that is something in my mind I think we need somebody who sits down and puts structures, puts regulations, puts timing, and puts routing. It is only then that we will be able to control the fares. And I would ask my colleague, I congratulate you for bringing this, actually look at the NTSA Act and bring to us here, if you can, a bill that will force these people to actually route vehicles, decide on where people come in, structure that will be used for vehicles, the timing for vehicles. It can be done. Mr. Speaker, as I end, I want to tell you, I went to Brasilia and I was surprised that the transport system that existed in this town in the 70s and the 60s was actually almost copied, let me say word by word, structure by structure. And it is working well. You know, Brasilia came into being when Sao Paulo became totally ungovernable in terms of transport and everything. So a president said, we are going to construct a new headquarters, and Brasilia came in. And when I looked at what they have there, that is what we had here. We have to go back. The NTSA, Mr. Speaker, has to sit down and do the work it is supposed to do. Give us guidelines, then the fares will fall in place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this.
Well, what surprises me, Honorable Dr. Nyikal, is nowadays you are becoming a jack of all trades and a master of all of them. Now, I thought this was not your area because this is transport, but you spoke as if it was medical field. But that's okay. That's how members of parliament are supposed to behave. So, speaking about disability, which you spoke a great deal, I think I should give opportunity to Honorable Dr. Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, as you have rightly put it, this is a good motion, and I thank Honorable Ditmas Barasa for bringing it to the attention of the House. Honorable Speaker, those who suffer most are persons with disabilities. Honorable Speaker, this House should be aware that if a person with disability is on a wheelchair, and it is during rush hours, and when it is raining, Honorable Speaker, these matatus are in rush, and they see the snail speed of a person with disability on a wheelchair in entering the matatu as a deterrent to them to rush and make more profit. Honorable Speaker, persons with disabilities can stand on those bus stops for hours, being rained on, waiting to board a matatu. Honorable Speaker, and once they have boarded that matatu, and you are on a wheelchair, you will pay 3 times. You will pay your own fare, you will pay the fare of the wheelchair, you also pay the fare of whoever is your assistant who will go and push you on that particular wheelchair. Honorable Speaker, so it is high time that this House regulate on the matatu industry so that we can put policies and requirements as per our constitution that enshrine everybody with a right to move from point A to point B. Honorable Speaker, we have the Person with Disability Act, which, Honorable Speaker, was enacted in 2003 in this House through session paper number 14. Honorable Speaker, it became operational in 2004. And there was a grace period for everybody to adjust their building to be accessible to persons with disability and to adjust the transport sector to be accessible to persons with disability. Up to date, Honorable Speaker, the grace period was for 5 years, and up to date, Honorable Speaker, the matatu industry is what is pulling Kenya down in terms of disability advocacy. In terms of disability rights, Kenya have done some stride, have made some stride that have made Kenya at the peak of disability rights in Africa and number 5 in the world. But due to the matatu, the chaotic matatu industry, that is why we are not number 1 in the whole world on disability rights. There are policies this government have put in place that is nowhere else in the world. Access to government procurement opportunity by persons with disability. Tax exemption by persons with disability. Importation of duty-free vehicles by persons with disability. Sign language being the 3rd official language in Kenya, in this country. Honorable Speaker, and even a unit in the university and in colleges, in the training of architects and civil engineers that is specifically for accessibility and disability mainstreaming. Honorable Speaker, one of the indicators of performance contract in all ministries, departments, and agencies is disability mainstreaming. This country have made a lot of strides in the realization of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, but what is pulling us down is the matatu, the chaotic matatu industry. We need to regulate the chaotic matatu industry, especially in line with the Persons with Disability Act of 2003. Honorable Speaker, if the rest are suffering, persons with disability are suffering the most. Honorable Speaker, it is also pathetic that we have given authority to a collection of people, a gang, to regulate, to know which prices are supposed to be charged, to know which route is expensive, which road have potholes. Nowadays, Honorable Speaker, fare is increased depending on the increase in potholes. You can wake up and you are told potholes have increased in your route. So the fare today have increased 2 times, 3 times, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the fares from Narok to Nairobi, Honorable Speaker, at times is 350. You come, sometimes you are told it's 700. Why? Because there is rains, because there is a graduation ceremony in the University of Nairobi, so there is a lot of traffic towards Nairobi. Honorable Speaker, we cannot allow a certain category of people who are there to make profit at the expense of our own citizens who elected members of this House, Honorable Speaker. And this House is a House that is supposed to make laws and to make policies that protect all persons with disability, all persons in this country, including those with disabilities, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, Michuki tried, and during the time of Michuki, there was sanity in the industry. If there was Michuki, and he brought sanity as an individual in the Matatu industry, this House have 349 members. If we cannot bring sanity, the 349 of us cannot bring sanity in the Matatu industry that almost Michuki succeeded, Honorable Speaker, we will have failed as a House, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, this is a motion that this House should come together and support so that it can be implemented in time, Honorable Speaker, to make sure that the Matatu industry is regulated and is put online so that we don't have this chaos that is in the Matatu sector. Honorable Speaker, even if we have to protect our citizens, we have also to protect the investors, because these investors employ thousands of our youth, but we should protect them not to make exorbitant profits at the expense of commuters, because this House must protect both of them, the investors as well as the commuters, because all of them are our electorate. All of them are looking upon this House to regulate and to make laws that will protect all of them. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, and I do support.
Very well. Let's have a Honorable Tim Wanyonyi, member for Westlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, for us to control the public transport, the government must be involved. Mr. Speaker, all over the world, cities own public transport. But in this country, Mr. Speaker, is the only country maybe in the world that the city, Mr. Speaker, protect me from this consultation around here, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we want to control the chaos in the Matatu industry, the public transport, the government must get involved. In the 80s, in the 90s, Mr. Speaker, when we had Kenya Bus, there was order in public transport. Mr. Speaker, when I travel in the other parts of the world, I use public transport. But in this country, using public transport is almost a nightmare. Mr. Speaker, I believe that for us to be able to put order in public transport, the government must seriously be involved, and we must bring an alternative to the Matatu. As long as there's no alternative, Mr. Speaker, that will not be possible to control this chaos that is there. NTSA, Mr. Speaker, was brought. I thought they will bring some order and regulation. They should come up with how public transport is managed. And then the city county government of Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and others, Mr. Speaker, they should take a stake in the public transport. That's the only way we are going to bring order in the public transport. We are decrying of decongesting the city. How do we decongest the city when the public transport is in chaos? That can only be done, Mr. Speaker, so that people can have confidence in using public transport. And we talk about people with disability. Mr. Speaker, people with disability have no access to public transport. And they incur a lot of costs using alternative means, which, Mr. Speaker, it disadvantages them, and most of them, in fact, when they see you in a wheelchair, no Matatu wants to take you. And I believe that, Mr. Speaker, this motion should now be taken even a notch higher so that we can bring a bill or amend the existing laws, Mr. Speaker, on transport to bring order in the public sector. Mr. Speaker, if Honorable Michuki managed to bring sanity in the public transport, I don't think it is impossible. It's not impossible for us even to do it now. And I believe that we can do it by just implementing the existing legislations. Mr. Speaker, the routes were defined for the buses, were Kenya Bus when they were there at that time, Mr. Speaker. The time schedule for the operation was also there. And the transport was predictable. You could use one bus from here going to the airport or going to the other part of the city, and the route was very clear. But today, Mr. Speaker, you can take a public transport from here, and it doesn't arrive at the destination that you are told at the beginning. And that's where we are having these bad manners on public transport. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, they also, public transport, is driven by profit making. And most of these people, Mr. Speaker, they take advantage when there's a situation like at rush hour and other times, Mr. Speaker. When you go to other cities, Mr. Speaker, you will see in public transport, they have displayed even the legislation that controls or regulates the public transport and how much they're supposed to charge. I believe this can be done even here if we mean business to bring some order in the public transport. Mr. Speaker, I want to support this motion, but I believe that we can even do better by bringing much more sanity in the public transport sector. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Will be Honorable Wakungu Wamalwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, Article 95 of the Constitution says that the National Assembly can deliberate and resolve any issue of concern to the people. Public transport in this country, Mr. Speaker, it is indeed a big concern. Because, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to rush hours, you realize that the Matatu operators, they always double or triple the fares. And it really inconveniences people because, Mr. Speaker, in terms of planning, you know very well the fare from here to Dandora is 100 bob. But when it's in the evening peak hours, if it goes to 200, Mr. Speaker, you'll agree with me that you don't have money. Mr. Speaker, again, when you give the money, when it comes to giving you change, it becomes a problem. When you go to big cities, Mr. Speaker, whether in the US, in the UK, you realize the public transport is very organized. And you find, Mr. Speaker, in many other jurisdictions where public transport is organized, people do not even use the private vehicles, Mr. Speaker. So this motion, Mr. Speaker, should be given the support it requires so that we can be able to bring order in the public industry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we speak today, this Parliament cannot be passing motions in vain. I know many times we've been urging, but this one is saying we resolve. How I had wished that the chairman of the Committee of Implementation is here today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Wednesdays are very important days, mornings, because it's a day for the private members, Mr. Speaker. And this is the time members can exercise their responsibility of legislation. Mr. Speaker, we know very many members of Parliament who have passed laws. We know the Donde Bill, Mr. Speaker, for instance. Joe Donde was in this House, Mr. Speaker. It was passed on a Wednesday. Private members. That's why House Business Committee, Mr. Speaker, when they come here with procedural motions at times to change, at times some of us, Mr. Speaker, we support it reluctantly. And this is also to encourage honorable members that Wednesday is made for you to legislate. Jogin Dungu, for instance, Mr. Speaker, she's known for the sexual offences bill. And this is something that has come, Mr. Speaker.
Did you say Madam Speaker?
I said Mr. Speaker.
Did I hear you well?
No, I said Mr. Speaker.
Is there any confusion? Proceed, Honorable Amado.
No, you're a Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, Wednesday morning, it's a day that is very critical. And I'm encouraging other honorable members to try their best to come up with the motions. And you also want House Business Committee to prioritize the efforts of the members, Mr. Speaker. Because if a member has done research, a motion is on the way, queuing forever, and doesn't see the light, Mr. Speaker, indeed they get discouraged. And that's why I want to thank Honorable Didmas for such a wonderful motion, and to encourage others, Mr. Speaker, to come. And when this motion passes, Mr. Speaker, you are entitled to opposing. Minority are hard, but majority carry the day. You can oppose. It's your democratic right. But we will also handle you, mundu mundu. So you don't have monopoly of numbers in this house. The issue is this: everybody is entitled to speak his mind about this. And to me, the honorable member has done very well, because the Matatu industry is chaotic. Mr. Speaker, when it rains in this city, if transport is 100 shillings, it will be tripled, Mr. Speaker. And you can imagine you only have 100 in the pocket. This is corruption, Mr. Speaker, that you're talking about. And regulations must be put in place to check where the unscrupulous people want to reap, where they never saw. That's why Parliament is there, and that's why Article 95, Mr. Speaker, is there. So once this bill, I'm sure it's going to go through, the doubting Thomases will see their light. That is okay. But we are here. We are also determined, because we are also serious legislators here. Nobody has monopoly of knowledge, Mr. Speaker. And as we move on, Mr. Speaker, this House, each member is equal. There's no member who is more important than any other. When you come here, you are an equal member like any other. Whether you are first timer, second timer, or third timer. The issue is this: we must have respect for others. Honorable.
Well, now I'm struggling to follow you.
Now, Mr.
Now, as you wind,
my friend Honorable Kaluma was disorienting me. He was telling me I'm opposing. So I was like, you'll give him an opportunity, let him oppose. I mean, he's entitled to his opinion.
I will not give Kaluma now. Now that you say every member is equal, I'm going to give Honorable Kamuren next, because he's the youngest member of this.
No,
this
light
house.
touch, Mr.
But
Speaker.
finalize anyway.
You know, he says that because he brought a child bill which I supported and he was rejected. Because, anyway, we don't want to go into those details. He's a very good friend of mine. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I'm encouraging honorable members. We support this issue so that we can be able to regulate the public industry, and this will help in reducing the traffic jams in the city. Because once it's well regulated, Mr. Speaker, many people will leave their private cars at home, and they'll be able to use the public transport. And we do know very well, about 90%, Mr. Speaker, in this city, most of the people in the lower middle level income, they use the public transport, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank Honorable Didmas for the efforts he has shown and the efforts he has put when it comes to matters of legislation. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support.
Honorable Cameron Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I want to support this motion, Honorable Speaker. And my concerns, Honorable Speaker, is that we have a cabinet secretary in charge of this, Honorable Speaker. I remember some time back when the cabinet secretary, the minister, that time, Honorable Muchuki, was in charge of transport. Using what was there, the rules that were there, he was able to control and to bring things in order. Honorable Speaker, I am wondering, out of the regulations that is there, as to why, who is failing here? We may blame the SACCOs. We may blame the investors that they are increasing these fares. But who is supposed to be controlling them? There is systems of government in place. There is a cabinet secretary who is controlling, he is in charge. He has to work towards the 4 big agendas of His Excellency the President. Right now, the common man is suffering. And His Excellency the President wants to leave a legacy. Somebody is increasing fares anyhowly. And there is a cabinet secretary in charge, and there is the entire ministry. If the late Muchuki was able to control, what is not happening with this? What is not happening now? Mr. Speaker, I think there is a bit of laxity in that ministry. Honorable Speaker, we need to call upon the Cabinet Secretary first of all, using the systems that he has, to start controlling and putting things in order. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, it is because of the corruption in this nation. These investors, the owners of these vehicles, when they are going round and carrying passengers, the roadblocks that are there, the payments that they pay, in the name of tips, in the name of giving something so that they can be allowed to move on, is making this increase. It's resulting on this increment. Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of mess in this industry. And we have the capacity. I agree with the member that brought this motion that there is need to regulate these fares so that Kenyans can also achieve and they will not be exploited the way they are exploited at the moment. And there is a mess all across, Mr. Speaker, including what is going on all through in terms of security. There is a lot of mess all through. And I know maybe the cabinet secretary here does not control the security organs, the police who are manned these roads. He may not have all that authority compared to the Minister of Interior. You know, Mr. Speaker, the other day I lost 5 young people as a result of a gun, just because of laxity. And up to now, there is no arrangement that the government is having. So there is a bit of a laziness all across the ministries. And we want the government to pull up and improve on service delivery so that at least things are going as expected by the Kenyans. Otherwise, there is a lot of exploitation, and somebody is failing, and even the 4 agendas is going to fail, and the legacy of His Excellency is going to fail if the common man is exploited and is the one paying taxes, again on the road again is being exploited. Then we shall not have harmonies all over. So I support this motion. Thank you.
Shall we have Honorable Oduol Adhiambo?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the onset, I would like to support this motion and thank Honorable Didmas Baraza for bringing the motion. Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, I want to agree with the members who have spoken before me that we really are talking about the transport sector. And Mr. Speaker, what we are saying, we see that although the NTSA indeed is the arm or unit that would be providing policy directions and regulation, as we see in other countries, there seems to be some capacity lapse or lack of focus. Mr. Speaker, when we look at countries like Botswana and South Africa, if we are to mention Africa, we would see that they do have in the public transport system a wide array of buses, Matatus, like what we have here. But indeed, Mr. Speaker, because there is a clear system and there are policies and the acts that the government has put in place to regulate and manage transport in the public sector in action, we see that government regulates fares. And we do not have a situation where we would, in Botswana, for example, or in South Africa, just have Matatus or the owner or some other person wake up and just change the fare. Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, therefore, I'd like that we recognize that we indeed want to call upon the NTSA and indeed to ensure that we think of transport, particularly public service transport, as a system, that we would like to be clearly defining the needs. We need to know where commuters are. We need to be defining when it is that they would need to be moving from one point to another one. As was indicated earlier, Mr. Speaker, by the Honorable Dr. Nyikal, we need to be clear on routes, and we would not want to have a situation where we just have any person who happens to choose on that particular day to run a Matatu or some other public system, not only to decide on the route and the fare. And Mr. Speaker, I also would want to emphasize that when we are thinking about regulating fares and when we think about what is obtaining in the public service system or sector at this time, we want to remember that commuters, when we think of their needs, are of different categories. We do have commuters who are children, some of whom are school-going. We have commuters who are elderly. We have commuters who are those that are in the family way, who would need some kind of special need. And in particular, Mr. Speaker, we have commuters who are persons with disability. As I indicated earlier, Mr. Speaker, I recently, under the banner of the Committee of National Cohesion and Equal Opportunity, had a chance to visit Dubai. And the major conference issue that we were dealing with was with persons with disability. A key factor that we noted, Mr. Speaker, which would be useful for us in Kenya, particularly as NTSA and others looking at policy and regulation choose to seek to ease the challenges that we face, would be to look at the interests and the needs of the persons with disability, which, Mr. Speaker, in Dubai, in order to ensure that there is a change of mindset, they were calling persons of determination. How do you ensure that policy makers, regulations, determine the needs? And so that, Mr. Speaker, when we are thinking about the transport regulation and thinking of fares, we would see that when you are looking at the persons with disability or persons of determination, you would not only be thinking of how it is that you ensure that the infrastructure of the Matatus or the buses itself is taken care of, but you would, as they do in Dubai, indeed have special cards that would allow those persons that are determined to have special needs to be able to access the transport at subsidized rates, and in some cases, indeed, even free of charge. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, I would want to just once again ensure that we want to look much more closely at what it is that already exists, because if we do have an act in place and we feel that there are gaps, it is those gaps with regards to policy, with regards to regulations that we need to handle, and in particular, it is necessary that we ensure that we do not allow the kind of confusion and indeed free for all, where companies, where associations, where SACCOs, where sometimes individual Matatu owner or public service vehicle owners take advantage and choose to become those who define on their own what policy they are going to implement, how they are going to do it, and in particular the kinds of fee they are going to charge. And so I want, Mr. Speaker, making note that we would want to go beyond just regulating fares, but to remember that transport is indeed a very, very key aspect and key sector. To thank the honorable member for bringing the motion, and indeed to thank the House as we support that we resolve that we will indeed ensure that we have policy, clear policy frameworks, that there will be regulations, and we will not leave our very important sector of transport open to whoever would want to make decisions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Before I give to the next person, allow me to recognize some schools that are at the public gallery. We have Otugi Secondary School from Rari constituency, Kiabu County. We also have Remuru Girls High School from Remuru constituency, Kiabu County. We also have Patterson Memorial Secondary School, Kajiado West, Kajiado County. And we have Terige Boys High School, Mgwen constituency, Nandi County. The schools are welcome. Let's have now Honorable Denita.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to really support this motion. And Honorable Speaker, allow me to really thank the member for Kimilili, Honorable Didmas Barasa, for this very important motion. Mr. Speaker, I am speaking, as you are aware, as an accessibility ambassador for people with disabilities. And Mr. Speaker, I speak also on behalf of people with disabilities, Mr. Speaker, who are usually the first culprits when it comes to the issue of transport. Honorable Speaker, transport in this country continues to be a very big mess and a challenge for Kenyans and especially persons that live with disability. Honorable Speaker, you have seen that for a long time, when persons with disability want to get into a bus or into a train, even the current situation at the SGR, Honorable Speaker, the SGR in this country has completely not factored in the concerns of persons with disabilities, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this is a motion that has come at the right time. Honorable Speaker, if you remember last week in this House, I brought my statement at 0 hour, Honorable Speaker, to discuss the challenges that persons with disabilities in this country face when it comes to accessing transport. And especially, Honorable Speaker, on the concerns of persons with disabilities in the bus rapid transit system that this country, Honorable Speaker, is about to launch. Honorable Speaker, the issue of transport in this country is a government project. And Honorable Speaker, it is the responsibility of the government to ensure that its people access transport in this country with a lot of dignity, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the issue of accessibility, and especially accessibility for persons with disabilities in all other sectors, Mr. Speaker, is something that is enshrined in the UN Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, in the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Everywhere, Honorable Speaker, accessibility is actually something that is seriously enshrined there. And Honorable Speaker, it is therefore the responsibility of this country to ensure that people access wherever they want to access, Mr. Speaker, with the dignity that they deserve. Mr. Speaker, we have seen circles in this country. Most of the transport sector in this country are managed by circles. We have the Rainbow Shuttle, the Rainbow Circle that I know. We have Orokise Circle. We have so many other circles, Honorable Speaker, that actually seem like they're organized to control transport in this country. But Mr. Speaker, you realize that sometimes, especially during festive seasons, the numbers, Honorable Speaker, and the conductors and the drivers just wake up one morning and they have already set the fare. Mr. Speaker, the transport fares, depending on, I don't know how they slept and how they woke up and whether it is raining and whether it is not raining. Honorable Speaker, those fares are not regulated. Those are fares that they just wake up and decide today from Athi River to Nairobi is 200 shillings in the morning. Then in the evening, you'll find Nairobi to Athi River, it is 100 or 500 shillings. Honorable Speaker, that is wrong. Honorable Speaker, I have had the opportunity of living away out of this country. I have lived in New York City, Mr. Speaker, where I have worked and studied for quite some time. You realize that countries like those US, they have organized their own systems so well that members have the Metro cards that we used to have here in this country. The Metro cards, Mr. Speaker, are what controls the transport and the fares of those developed nations. Mr. Speaker, it is easier. We are not living, for example, Mr. Speaker, in this country, when a person with disability wants to travel from Nairobi to Athi River, Honorable Speaker, persons with disability are at the mercy of the driver or as the conductor. You have seen where people with disabilities are usually not even taken in because, Mr. Speaker, you have a wheelchair, you want to access that bus, the driver feels you are wasting his time, the driver will leave you there with your wheelchair and your disability and continue because they want to make money. Honorable Speaker, even as we discuss these fares of how we regulate the fares, Honorable Speaker, we need to capacity build these numbers and these makangas and these drivers of our transport system on how they need to handle Kenyans when it comes to accessibility to the transport system. Honorable Speaker, the BRT system is coming. The BRT is the bus rapid transit that is coming to this country. Honorable Speaker, how is the BRT concerned about parking? How is the BRT concerned about how Kenyans are going to be entering into those buses? How do people with disabilities, because people with disabilities, Mr. Speaker, want to access the city. They want to come to town and look at the city and roam around and go back home, Mr. Speaker. And those are the concerns that this government has to put in place, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that these circles are not exploiting our people. We are realizing, Mr. Speaker, that Matatu operators in Kenya for a long time are actually taking advantage of the non-existent laws that are not there to exploit our people. If I travel from Nairobi to Migori, Mr. Speaker, or to Isibania, where I come from, Mr. Speaker, it must be known that transport from Nairobi by bus to Isibania border is 1,000 shillings. Or to Narok is 500 shillings. And this is something, Mr. Speaker, that we need to make sure that awareness is created amongst our people, Mr. Speaker, because we want to sanitize the public sector. We want to sanitize the transport sector in this country to ensure that matatus are not hiking fares right, left, and center. Mr. Speaker, we have laws in this country, and those laws have to be enforced. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a motion that has the best interest of Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. It is a motion that seeks to cushion Kenyans from, all this harassment, Mr. Speaker, and we want to see, Mr. Speaker, that these drivers and these people in the transport sector, Honorable Speaker, are actually well trained and well capacity built, Mr. Speaker. It's not just about the fares, Mr. Speaker. Everyone can afford the fare. Mr. Speaker, it is about the treatment. How do we sanitize the transport sector so that, Mr. Speaker, you get into a bus with a lot of dignity, feeling that you have paid to get the services that you receive from these matatus, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, for me, this is a very, very important motion. This is a motion that speaks for my people, persons with disabilities, and especially the challenges, Mr. Speaker, that persons with disabilities encounter in the transport sector. So, Honorable Speaker, allow me to really, really thank the member for bringing this motion, and quickly just say that, Mr. Speaker, even as we discuss this, we also need to look at how do we create designated drop-off points. How do Kenyans know, for example, where are the pickup points, where exactly are areas that are marked very well, that this is an area where you'll be picked, this is an area where you will be dropped, this is an area where the bus will pass. Mr. Speaker, there are so many things that need to be done to really, really bring sanity to the transport sector in this country. And Mr. Speaker, this is a rare opportunity that these members, also honorable members seated here, should support, so that, Mr. Speaker, for once, we are able to ensure that accessibility of persons with disabilities, accessibility of Kenyans in the transport sector is something that is extremely guaranteed and is something that is taken with a lot of dignity that it deserves. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity.
We have one more school at the Speaker's Gallery that I'd like to recognize, Kadhiani Girls High School from Kadhiani constituency, Machakos County. That's the girls from that school are also welcome, and their accompanying teachers. Now, before we get to minority leader, shall we have Honorable Koi Waluke? Honorable members, I am completely guided by the list here, and I will follow it strictly as you will be seeing. Yes, Honorable.
You are not here before me, but you are a junior if that's the case. Yeah, Honorable Speaker, thank you for giving me the chance also to speak. this is not a university where we, you know,
Order, Honorable Aruke. Proceed. Order, Honorable Aruke. Please proceed.
You are not. How full is that?
Order, Honorable Aruke. You don't have to have a crossfire with the Honorable Bob
I was
who
given
will certainly
just
get
by
a
the
chance
speaker,
to speak.
not you.
Order, Honorable Aruke. Please proceed.
Are you mad? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This
Order, what is it, Honorable Oresankok?
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, I know my good friend, Honorable Babu Owino, is agitated, and you know, he has been a student leader, and he is really vocal, and he was actually here earlier. So, but he's out of order, exchanging crosswords with Honorable Waluke. Honorable members, let us learn to go through the Speaker, Honorable Speaker, and take control, Honorable Speaker. Because,
very well, Honorable Oresankok. As I said, the Speaker is completely clear. Honorable Bobu, who is raising an issue, is actually number 4 on my list. And he will get a chance like any other member. I will strictly follow the list here. Honorable Waruke, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion, Mr. Speaker, that was brought by Honorable Ditmas Barasa, and I want to thank him. Mr. Speaker, there has been a very big problem in this country, Mr. Speaker, on transport sector, where actually we need to take control as Parliament, because we are the ones who make laws of this country, Mr. Speaker, where the Matatu doubts, Mr. Speaker, have taken control as if the government is not there. Mr. Speaker, history speaks for itself. Many people or many members are referring to Honorable Michuki when he was the Minister for Transport. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Michuki performed in every ministry he went. Mr. Speaker, he did his work. And the ministers concerned with the Ministry of Transport, Mr. Speaker, should learn from Michuki rules, because when Michuki was there, Mr. Speaker, when he brought this about safety belts, after he died, everything went haywire, Mr. Speaker, because there was no control on transport sector, Mr. Speaker, because the minister was not there. But we have other ministers, Mr. Speaker, who took over from him. Like now, the CS is there. But there are so many mistakes that are being done by Matatus. And the routes, sometimes they change as they want. The people with disability are not taken care, as we see in this country, Mr. Speaker, compared to other countries where we've been going. Mr. Speaker, like in the US, I've been there. When you use the public means, Mr. Speaker, after getting your ticket, it is only the driver who will take you to your designated area without any disturbance. And we need to follow, to learn from other countries, Mr. Speaker, to copy from where we have been visiting, and then make this country also attractive. Mr. Speaker, transport sector is very important to us as a country, because we cannot all afford to buy private vehicles or to use private vehicles. even with the structure in this country, Mr. Speaker, our country, since 1963, some roads have not been improved since. Like, let's say, in the CPD, because of the buildings, Mr. Speaker. So the architects who were there before, Mr. Speaker, thought that maybe it will remain the same, but without considering the population, if it will increase, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we need some many pipers also to allow Matatus move smoothly in this country, Mr. Speaker. And the rules also should be changed so that Matatu should follow rules of this country, not that they just decide on their own. And in many areas, Mr. Speaker, I can say that there are people in this country, like police, Mr. Speaker, owns Matatu. And that is why you can see sometimes a lot of traffic, because Matatus decide to stop anywhere, and they feel, because they know that the owner is a policeman, and then they just decide on anything that they can do, because they know that if they will be arrested, maybe they will be there for 5 minutes, and then their vehicle is released back to road, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Ditmas has come up with this. I know this motion is going to pass, and after that, Mr. Speaker, we need to put strict rules to make sure that our people, that Kenyans do not suffer because of Matatu decisions. We need to have command and control, Mr. Speaker, on Matatus, so that even visitors who come from...
You sleep, because you walk into these minibuses, Matatus, and the moment you get in, you are like in a disco. The moment you get in, the seatbelts are either not there or they are very dirty. And when you get in when when the vehicle has seats, all of a sudden you are crowded by a multitude of people around you who are standing, some leaning on you, some sitting on you. Mr. Speaker, I know many of us here don't experience this at the moment, including myself. But I know this because I experienced it before I bought my personal car. I know it because I live with people who still use Matatus. So, Mr. Speaker, the solution, in my view, and which I would advise the Honorable Dismas Barasa to propose to this House, this is good, but if it was a bill, I would have been reluctant to approve it. What I think we need to do is to seriously think of how then do we have that organized public transport. Because you cannot start telling people that you are going to charge 100 shillings from this day to this day. Mr. Speaker, having regulations in this country or thinking that we can regulate all the sectors of the economy is also affecting this economy. Look at the banking sector. Because of the cartels, we had to make a decision which to me was very radical and which, by the way, Mr. Speaker, does not make economic sense. That now we have fixed interest rates. It does not make economic sense. If you're an economist or you're a finance person, you know it does not make economic sense to fix interest rates, chargeable or payable. But why did we have to do it? We did it out of frustration because of the cartels had already captured the banking sector. Even if you plead with them, you talk with them, actually we were even threatening them, but they were not taking action. In fact, the banking sector had reached a point that they were law unto themselves in this country. And they never imagined that Parliament would reign on them. Several attempts were made to control that sector. It was not possible. But we did something that does not make economic sense out of frustration. Now I see the same happening in this House. We are again, and through Honorable Didmas Barasa, whom I think has genuine concern for the people of Kenya. And everybody is concerned about the fares. In December, the bus companies just decide to hike fares sometimes 300%. You ask yourself first, the roads are still the same. The distance is the same. The price of fuel is the same. Sometimes it even goes down. But these people, just because Kenyans are desperate to go to their rural areas, decide to triple the fare. That is not justifiable. It is theft, and we need to rein on. In fact, where I think we need to come in is to rein on the owners of these vehicles and these bus companies, the Matatus, to have people with good records, to be employed as drivers and to be employed as Matatu touts. We cannot have criminals controlling an important sector like public transport. You find people who are even taking drugs, hard drugs, are the ones who are managing the truck. Look, just the other day, someone has been hit by a Matatu. He's driving his car along Thika Road. He has been hit by Matatu. And instead of the Matatu taking responsibility, these touts and Matatus come out and kill the same person. It is very, very, very inhuman. And that is because we have criminals on the road. We have criminals controlling a very important sector where lives of Kenyans, and that is why we have so many accidents in this country, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to ask Honorable Didmas Barasa, as we pass this motion, that I think because he is the one who has already engaged his mind into this, and I want to congratulate him for that. Many of us do a lot of politicking, although I also see him a lot of times, sometimes doing a lot of politicking in funerals, which is not bad because really we are politicians. But since he has come out with a well-thought idea, I want him to engage his mind even further, to come up with a bill that would amend some of the, either amend some of the existing statutes, or even come up with a fresh bill on public transport. And
so, Mr. Speaker, it has come a long way. And, Mr. Speaker, the need to regulate the sector is very important. If you go to some of the cities in Africa that are working, such as Kigali, you find that, Mr. Speaker, they have one of the best organized transport systems. And it is not rocket science, Mr. Speaker. It's something that can be done. But I hold the views, Mr. Speaker, that we really do not need to regulate fares, because fares is a question of supply and demand. And you remember, Mr. Speaker, we operate in a free market economy, where, again, when we begin to define the cost of goods and services, Mr. Speaker, we might actually be, confining our economy and making the economy not able to expand. I say this, Mr. Speaker, because I know that this Parliament has tampered with certain sectors of the economy, one of which is the banking sector. Today, Mr. Speaker, you all know that our financial system is not working. The banking sector is likely to collapse in the very near future. Like they are the law unto themselves. They can pick anywhere, even if there's a stage where they're supposed to drop passengers, they ignore the stage and they just do drop passengers and pick wherever they want. They are actually inconveniencing and making life in the cities very difficult. So, Mr. Speaker, in that direction, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that it is important for us to be able to address that issue and ensure that it is working. Mr. Speaker, our counties are in charge of managing, in a way, the transport side, transport operations in the cities. And, Mr. Speaker, we must say that some of our counties, some of our county governments are failing us. For instance, Mr. Speaker, here in Nairobi, I hold the view that we do not have a strong leadership in the county. And that is the reason why we are unable to fix some of these challenges in the county. Remember recently, there were attempts to illegalize entry of Matatus in the city. And, Mr. Speaker, there was a crisis until, Mr. Speaker, leaders had to make noise until the proposal was dropped. It was a proposal that was brought forth without proper consultation and without proper thinking. There wasn't sufficient brain work applied on it. So, Mr. Speaker, what I want to say as I summarize, is that let us be an open economy. You know, let us be a free market economy indeed. Because if we are going to be a free market economy on one side, and the other side we try to tie up certain sectors, Mr. Speaker, in overall performance of the economy, we are going to suffer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support with those reservations.
Yes, Honorable Jaldesa Dida.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for finally giving me this opportunity to also contribute. From the onset, Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to thank my brother, Honorable Didmas Baraza, for bringing this very important motion that is so key and critical to the ordinary Kenyans of this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to join my colleagues who said that we do not have shortages of laws and regulations in this country, but the main problem we have in this country is lack of enforcement. And Mr. Speaker, my prayers are that as I support this motion by Honorable Didmas, he will follow it to ensure that it is enforced to the latter. Mr. Speaker, I'm saying this because we have institutions like NTSA, which is mandated to ensure that transport sector in this country is regulated. But Mr. Speaker, Kenyans being who they are, very emotional because of the many accidents that happen in this country, NTSA was diluted. The enforcement aspect was removed and taken back to the traffic. And since, Mr. Speaker, I am yet to see any improvement. Therefore, even Kenyans are basically to blame. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the main problem in this country is a roadside directive. And this roadside directive has somehow found its way back into this country, even after we vote for multi-party democracy and had many political space. I'm saying this, Mr.
Order, Honorable Jaldesa. What is it? Honorable Abdi had put an intervention, quickly removed it. Yes. Honorable Jaldesa, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm saying this because, Mr. Speaker, like just the other day, the CS in charge of Interior came up with directives to have the border and Pro Box, removed. That, in my view, has created more confusion into the transport sector, Mr. Speaker. It did not help Kenyans in any way. It only enabled corruption to thrive in this country, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, as we debate this very important motion, we must ensure that it is enforced and that we have sanity back into this country. Mr. Speaker, if I go back to issues of fares, Mr. Speaker, the fare in this country are usually hiked by the Matatu sectors and other players without due regards for the commuters. The commuters have no option, Mr. Speaker, but to conform or rather risk being stranded. Mr. Speaker, the fluctuations are so irregular that Matatus can hike its fare within an hour, Mr. Speaker, and without giving a good convincing reason. Mr. Speaker, some of the reasons that are being given for these hikes are reasons such as it is raining. So all of a sudden when it rains, the fare starts going up without any reason. Another flimsy excuse is that there are traffic police. Therefore, because the traffic police are there, they have to increase their fare. Mr. Speaker, sometime you hear it is Christmas. And because it is Christmas, then the demands the demand is high, and therefore the poor Kenyans have to suffer. It is like Christmas is something just comes from the blues, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another funny one is the speculation reports that, the fuel are likely to go up. So because fuels are likely to go up, then the prices will definitely just go up. Mr. Speaker, for all these reasons, I think it is the high time we must come up with a regulation, and that is why I want to again thank Mr. Mheshimiwa Didmas Barasa for really thinking outside the box. Mr. Speaker, as all these issues that I've highlighted is facing the Kenyans are not getting compensated. We are not compensating our poor workers because the prices are going up. And because of that, Mr. Speaker, the fare increases always have some other ripple effects. Mr. Speaker, it is because of such things that we have high rise of gender-based violence against women, Mr. Speaker. Because of the frustration, men will always go back to the house and start beating up their wives and their children, Mr. Speaker, because they have nowhere else to release the frustration. Mr. Speaker, we have seen the rise of robbery with violence, Mr. Speaker. And all this can just be attributed with this high cost of living that Kenyans are not prepared for. Mr. Speaker, women are the ones who suffer the most. Besides the beating that I mentioned, Mr. Speaker, if you go to the stages, you will find women being mishandled. Mr. Speaker, sometimes women are dropped off before reaching their destination because there is no order. Mr. Speaker, I have had and received complaints that the school-going children who are usually using this public transport, sometimes, Mr. Speaker, they are robbed off. When they give the money they have, they are usually not given changes back. So for Mr. Speaker, I think this sector needs a holistic approach into how we will coordinate the fare plus other regulations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I want to say, and I really want to ask myself, what has happened? We had the Michiki rule. That Michiki rule, Mr. Speaker, it is like, unfortunately, it went with the late CS Michuki. Nowadays, you go to the roads, you find the vehicles speeding to even 120, 140, and nothing is done. Mr. Speaker, some people are talking about BRT and how it will change the lives of this country. But Mr. Speaker, did we ever think about it? Have we as this country prepared for BRT? Do we have the infrastructure in place? I think, Mr. Speaker, this is just but another way of increasing confusion to this country. I don't want to deliver on this issue, but I know we have been told that we are expecting the first batches of the BRT buses by the end of this month. But Mr. Speaker, I used the Thika Road over the weekend, and even the red mark has since disappeared from the roads. Therefore, that brings me to another question. Are we really prepared? Are we really serious as this country? With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
Honorable Murugwara will come to you. I noticed that your mic dropped, but before you, let's have Honorable Babu Owino.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, transport is one of the most important things in the city. And as a Nairobi MP, as a city MP, let me switch this off, or switch them off, Mr. Speaker.
They will switch from here.
Okay.
You may proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The intention is not for you to speak using the three of them. Just use one.
And learn to pronounce my name, Mr. Speaker. It's Honorable Babu Owino, not Bobby. My friend is called Bobby Wine from Uganda.
I have seen a previous association, but please,
Thank you.
Now the name is clear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, in the transport industry, when you increase fares in transport, Mr. Speaker, you literally increase anything that is capable of being transported. That is from food, Mr. Speaker, construction materials, and when you increase the transport cost, food prices will go high, Mr. Speaker. When you increase transport cost, rent will be high since construction materials will also be charged higher.
The benefit of the constituents who elected us. Mr. Speaker, sir, I do rise to support this motion and state that it is now the right time that we actually get regulations regarding the Matatu sector. These regulations have to go to all branches of the Matatu industry such that it's not just fares that we are complaining about. There are other areas that need to be looked into, including sanity in that particular industry. Most of the times we have said that the Matatu industry borders on the absurd, in that it is not regulated in any way, but it is left to the whims of those who own Matatus as regards what is to be done and not to be done. Mr. Speaker, I recall very well that when I was studying economics in high school, we had 3 types of markets which we used to discuss in the economics class. There were the monopolies, and during that time the best example of monopolies we used to give was the ruling party KANU in the political arena. While that started forming groups, some of which were illegal, others were criminal, we call for a free market. There should be no regulation whatsoever. Let everybody sell whatever commodity you have at whatever price that is going to be attractive to the market. If we do that, and if we make regulations that are important to this industry, the market itself will control those prices. The regulations will have to be made by NTSA or whatever other sector, including the Ministry of Transport. We, including myself, who sit in the Committee on Delegated Legislation, will be able to look at these regulations, see to it that they meet the requirements of Kenyans, and we can always pass them, or we can always pass this, we can always walk this industry through the regulation making process with a view to coming up with the very best for the country. Otherwise, this is a timely motion. We need to support it. We need to amend where it is necessary. We just need to ensure that we have an industry which is Matatu and which is working to perfection. With those few remarks, I do beg to support the motion.
Very well. Honorable Korir Nixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clerk, I think this is very short. Maybe you can transfer me to the next. This is short. Yes, I can sit down. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the motion by Honorable Didmas Barasa. And I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, if you are to be truthful, we don't have a public system, public service system in this country. We have a confused system. And while I support, I support the issue of resolving to develop and implement regulation that control the fares in this country, I think we need to start with first organizing our system. The new initiative by the government to bring the BRTs is welcome. The SGR is also an initiative by the government to control the systems, the fares when you're traveling for long distance to Mombasa or all the way to Kisumu. But when it comes to Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have a confused system, a Matatu system that is not organized, that is run by cartels. To me, the issue of controlling and regulating the fares to different parts of this country should be secondary. The primary issue here is organizing our transport system to ensure that we have proper designated stages, we have proper good buses that are working in good condition. We appreciate what government has done in the past through the famous Michuki rules, the issue of the seat belts, the issue of the railway lines, the issue of the speed governors. but all those are focused on the hardware. It's focusing on the vehicle. But the focus, it's also focusing on the uniforms to the drivers and the conductors. But now the actual service, the delivery of the service in the Matatu has not been focused on. The amount that you pay, for example, where I represent Langata constituency, is determined by time. In the morning, you pay differently. Midday, you pay differently. In the evening, you pay differently. When it is raining, you pay differently. When there is sunshine, you pay differently. When there is wind, you pay differently. What we are saying is that it should be predictable. When you go to these other countries, you go to China, you go to Europe, you go to America, you know exactly what you are going to pay for. And you can actually decide. There are systems that you can pay for your fares for the whole month. And the only thing that you go is with a chip or a card, and every day you use the amount that you have paid for the whole month. But as it is right now, we don't have a proper system, and I want to say that it has really costed this country a lot of money, that we have a disorganized system of transport. I think what we need to be focusing on, and I want to challenge Honorable Barasa, because he has come up with this motion, is that
prices must be regulated. As yesterday, transportation is business, yes, but it's more enabler of other businesses. I think Babu Wino got it right. If you increase food transportation, it will go up in the prices in the restaurants. So let's treat this sector, which is going bananas, as an enabler to our economic development. If we look at it that way, if we want to grow the economy of this country, we should control these prices. In other countries, and we are over 55 years in independence, there's no reason why we cannot do that, Mr. Speaker. So I rise to say that I support this motion, and I hope this will take immediately. Members, let us support this and get over with so that it can be implemented to save our people from hiking prices from time to time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good contributions. Honorable members, allow me to recognize the presence in the Speaker's gallery, the presence of Reverend Richard Rollin from the U.S., the Reverend Sid Fofana from the USA, the Bishop Jaipul from India, and Bishop Luke Lin from the USA, who are all from the Praise Fellowship International Sports Academy in Pennsylvania, USA. They are welcome to our country, and we wish them success in their intentions. Honorable members, we shall have contribution from the Honorable Shinali Masaka, member for Ikolomani. But before the Honorable Shinali, is he in the House? No desiring to be present. We shall have then the Honorable Ogutu Abel, member for Bomachoge Borabu. But before the Honorable Ogutu makes his presentation, I hope there's representation from the Committee on Transport in the House, because the contributions and the topic that we are dealing with today is a matter that is very important to the transport system in this country, because I've had members make contribution about the bus, what is it called, BRT, rapid bus transport system that is the Transport Ministry is trying to implement on Thika Road. And what they are doing there, we need a clear explanation exactly how it is going to function. And I think the contributions here may be of help and may enrich that particular program. So it would have been useful for the Transport Committee to have been present. The Honorable Ogutu, proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity also to contribute to this very critical motion. The Speaker, I want to say that when we talk about regulation of public transport fares, we are actually talking about controlling the growth of our economy. We are talking about a sector that affects everyone. As an enabler, this sector affects a common man, affects Wanjiku, the Mamamboga, and everybody. So what impression do we get in terms of enabling or empowering these people
to contribute to our economy if their earnings cannot be managed well. We have seen a sector that is actually moving backwards from the better days when things were happening well in the transport sector to the current situation when we have so many challenges in this sector, and we do not seem to have to be making any headways in terms of making the expected change. The Speaker, I want to say that there have been many claims as to why the public sector will always hike the prices. People have spoken about the weather in Nairobi, but we also have the increase in the fuel prices, which is actually not justified, because we know in this country fuel's price goes up and comes down. But the Matatu fares, once they go up, they will never come down. I'm talking from a very disappointing experience where for the last 2 months since the Michuki rules were reactivated, vehicles operating between Kisii to Krigolis, Nyangusu and Kenyenya doubled their fares by 300%. And that is very unrealistic. And we see this happening. There is a public outcry. Nobody seems to be attending to these complaints. The police are daily seeing these things happening on the road and they are not acting. So I want to say that as we embark on the Big Four agenda, I think this enabler sector, the transport sector, needs to be thought seriously and also systematically, in the sense that you cannot create barriers for people to move and move easily and expect the economy to grow. So mine would be that we have this, the act that is in place. I think we need to interrogate this act and see where there are gaps. Other than the acts, we also need to think about the supervisory role of the various agencies in ensuring that certain practices that are authorized in this country, including the transport sector, are carried well monitored, are carried well controlled, and well managed to ensure that our people have peace. When we talk about controlling and managing public transport fares, we are talking about taking the agony that people travel daily undergo. Agony in terms of their
traffic lights. The irony is we also have traffic policemen. They are, instead of us being directed by the traffic lights, we are directed by these traffic police officers. And Mr. Speaker, this traffic jam leads to one of the reasons why fares are increased during the peak hours, Mr. Speaker. So can we have an elaborate traffic system that can be used, that can be respected, so that the role of this traffic police officer is not to tell the vehicles to move, but is to check who is it that is disobeying these traffic rules, Mr. Speaker. The cost of transport is also a basis of the cost that this Matatu incur in their line of business. Because when you're looking at pricing, every time you look at the price, you look how much time, how much money am I spending in terms of offering that service or offering that particular good, Mr. Speaker. What is the state of our roads? On the floor of this house, for example, is the issue of Molo Njoro Road, Mr. Speaker, is there are a lot of potholes. And therefore, the cost of Matatu drivers in Molo of maintaining that road has increased. And would therefore not expect those Matatus to charge the same transport as they would had the road been so smooth, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, the government has to come in, the Ministry of Transport, and make sure that our roads are in good condition, so that that vehicle, the depreciation of the vehicle, the maintenance cost of the vehicle are so low that therefore they will be able to, the Matatus will be able to charge that fee that we think would be reasonable, Mr. Speaker. We have started a railway system that's working from Mombasa to Nairobi, and now we are taking another one to Naivasha and probably all the way to Kisumu. But what happened to the old railway system? We have an existing railway, for example, connecting Nairobi, Naivasha, Nakuru, Njoro Molo, all the way to Londiani. What happened to that particular railway? The lines are still there. Why wouldn't we invest money and make sure that that system works, so that the competition that would create in this industry is not just with the Matatus alone, but you have other players in this market. Because as you speak, Mr. Speaker, the people that are here that are setting these rules, for example, we are all using our own vehicles. How many of us would use a Matatu, Mr. Speaker? And so before we start setting the prices that we charge on these Matatus, can we make sure that there is order, that I can wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to Parliament and I'm going to take a Matatu, I'm going to take a bus to go to Parliament. Only after that, Mr. Speaker, can we come as a house and start telling these people that this is the amount of money that you charge for this particular service. Because when we sit here and say this, we do not know the challenge that they go through. You go, you commute from one place to the other, then you find the road has been closed. There was no warning that that road would be closed. As a result, you spend 2 hours more going from point A to point B. Where will that investor recover the investment that they made in purchasing that Matatu, Mr. Speaker? Where will he get reimbursement for the extra fuel that they use? And no wonder, Mr. Speaker, if you're not, I was in university very recently, and from KU, one day I boarded a Matatu here, and they said, mbao, 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 mbao. And only for me to pay 20 shillings, and I was told, no, I said mbao tano, which was supposed to be 100 shillings. Because they have to lure you to get that Matatu, because once you get there, you will pay the fare that they want. Because, Mr. Speaker, there is so much disorganization in this sector. And the moment that we get it right, that we get our roads right, that we fix our roads such that even our border riders has a place by the side that they can comfortably drive by, then that is when we can tell them, charge price X. Because as a government, we would have been accountable enough to make roads that are passable, to make a sector that is orderly. And with that, I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good contribution, and I now see the Honorable Kosing in the House, Chair of Transport. And yes, this is the way it should be, that members' comments are taken by the chairs of the various departments that the motions may be in regard to. So the Honorable Kosing, we are grateful that you're in the House, and we are sure that you'll take relevant notes. The Honorable Chepkoech Joyce, member for Bomet.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this chance to contribute on this motion that has been brought forward by Honorable Didymus, who is a great friend of mine. I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that I want to echo the sentiments that have been said by the honorable members in this floor pertaining the motion that is within the floor today. Honorable Speaker, indeed, this is one of the motions that I want to say that it is touching on the lives of the Kenyans. It is really affecting the Kenyans all the way to the grassroots. And I want to say, though there is an issue that has been raised by the Honorable Barasa in terms of making the regulations, I want to applaud the member who have just sat on a number of issues that he has raised on the issue of putting up the regulations to govern the issue of hiking the prices. Honorable Speaker, I want to say this because in a number of instances, Honorable Speaker, there is some reasons that makes this organization not even to be able to run their day-to-day activities. And one of them are the issues that might have been caused by the government. For example, the issue that was raised recently by the relevant Ministry of Transport in terms of the issues of borders, the issues of the proboxes, that they were stopped from doing the issue of transportation, yet they were not having any data on the number of the owners that we have in this country. That is number one. Number two, the availability of the means of public transport in this country. Number three, the loans or the way they acquired those means of transport, Honorable Speaker. Remember, the border and the probox are from, the owners of these borders and the probox are just those people from the grassroots. I can say the Kenyans who are really struggling with their day-to-day life. And when you wake up one morning and you tell them that they have to stop, without going through a number of issues that you're supposed to put in place for you to make a conclusion as a government, I want to say on behalf of those operators that indeed it is a total mess. And that is why, Honorable Speaker, before I agree to the terms of putting the regulations, there are a number of issues that we need to see, so that at least when we are putting the regulations on in the issue of the prices, we also have to look at the ways and means of the transport system in this country. Be it in terms of infrastructure, be it in terms of availability of means of transport, be it in terms of, I can say generally anything that is touching on the issue of transport. It is really, really a big mess. And as we speak, a number of them have been forced to sell their piece of land to pay the loans that they used to purchase the borders, that they used to purchase the pro boxes and what have you, just because they cannot be given a free and fair hearing, Honorable Speaker. It is always good for the relevant ministry. And I want to thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this, for making the relevant department chair to be in the floor of this House, for him to at least be in a position to hear the cry from the honorable members, because they get it directly from the grassroots. Honorable Speaker, I want to say this because it is indeed block. The transporters are just next to the roadblock. They cannot cross over the other side. And it was shocking. I can testify, Honorable Speaker, of one incident that happened in Bomet. When I was coming out of my house, it was shocking enough that there was a border that was doing the transportation. Unfortunately, because of the issue that the roadblock has been put in place, and the guy wants to get the 50 shillings that they are running up and down looking for, Honorable Speaker, they waited for the police officer to address the two transporters who are around that area, and they ran away trying to evade the roadblock, Honorable Speaker. Funny enough, the policeman had to throw the roadblock rails towards the border guy. And I had to stop to ask him if the person who is transported is going to be hurt, who was going to be responsible. And the border guy told me that indeed it is a total mess, because they are looking for 50 shillings the whole day, but they are being chased by the government day in, day out, without the proper regulations, without putting up the infrastructures in place, so that at least they can now have the right prices, Honorable Speaker. Not only that, we also have the mamambogas. The mamambogas are looking for 100 shillings a day. But because of the high prices, I can tell you for sure, Honorable Speaker, they hardly get anything. And that is where the country is as of now. You've seen, I saw it over the social medias and the newspapers the other day, that 97 of the Kenyans hardly have 1 million shillings in their account. And this shows the state of the country as of now. So, Honorable Speaker, despite the fact that I support the motion in the floor of the House today, I want to say, let it be looked into critically. All the areas that is forcing this association to hike their prices, so that at least once you press on where you are going, you are given a ticket, and you have an allowance of about 4 hours. And it doesn't show whether you are brown or you are black or with the color or the race. So the machines can also assist. But I know that is still a dream in this country because of the issue of corruption. And a corruption that is also politicized. So I want to say, Honorable Speaker, I support the motion in the floor of this House today, but I want to say, let it be critically looked into, so that at least we can know, when we are making this regulation, is it covering all the areas that is causing these issues to happen? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Nangabo Janet, member for Trans Nzoia.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa nafasi hii, pia kuchangia katika mjadala huu ule umeletwa na Mheshimiwa Didmas akiwa ni mbunge wa Kimilili. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi pia nataka kushirikiana na wenzangu wale wanasema kwamba wanaunga mjadala huu wa kusema kwamba nauli zile zinalipishwa watu katika barabara zetu na haswa sekta ya uchukuzi katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Nataka niseme Mheshimiwa Spika, vile Mheshimiwa Tenita Kati ameongea mahali hapa kuhusu walemavu kutumia hii usafiri katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Hawa ni watu, baadhi yao wanapata shida sana Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sababu hawana nafasi ya kusimama ama kuongea na wale manamba wa matatu kusema kwamba hii nauli ya hizi pesa wacha iteremshwe, ama mimi nataka kutoka mahali hapa nikielekea mahali pengine. Inakuwa ni shida Mheshimiwa Spika kuona kwamba walemavu katika nchi hii ni wale watu wanaumia sana, aswa ikikuja hata ndani ya ofisi zetu, ikikuja tu usafiri kutoka nchi za ng'ambo, na hata kule sisi tunatoka kule mashinani na hata kaunti zetu, Mheshimiwa Spika, wanapata shida sana. Nataka niseme wenzangu hapa wameongelea juu ya washikadau katika sekta hii. Na ndiposa mimi ninakushukuru Mheshimiwa Spika kusema kwamba mwenyekiti wa usafiri katika kamati katika bunge hii akae hapa ndiposa tuone iko wapi pengo ile yenye tunaweza kushibisha mahali hapo, tuhakikishe kwamba tumekuwa na usafiri ulio safi katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Wacha niseme katika eneo hili na haswa eneo kama huko kwangu Trans Nzoia, unaona kwamba hawa wenye wako na matatu zao hawana nafasi hata ya kuwekeza haya magari zao. Inakuwa ni hakikisha kwamba hawa watu wa matatu wamepata nafasi zao, licha ya kusema kwamba wanaweza kubeba wananchi ama wasafiri kutoa eneo moja kuelekea eneo zingine. Na ndiposa mimi nasi kwamba serikali za kaunti zetu na serikali kuu kuhakikisha kwamba tumeweka mikakati mwafaka kuhakikisha kwamba usafiri wetu na hata hao wenye wanasafiri wamepata nafuu katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, naweza kumnukuu rais akisema kule Bomas of Kenya akisema kwamba mambo ya ofisati katika nchi yetu ya Kenya imekikiri misisi. Na ndipoza unaona hata wahutumu wa matatu ama wenye matatu unaona kwamba wengine wana vyeo kubwa katika serikali ama wengine ni maaskari. Mheshimiwa Spika, ikikuja nafasi hiyo wakisema hii nauli itakuwa namna gani, hiyo itakuwa ni uamuzi wa ule mtu mwenye ako na matatu. Na iwapo mwenye matatu yeye ni askari, Mheshimiwa Spika, mwananchi wa kawaida atapata namna gani nafuu ya kuhakikisha kwamba anaweza kusimama mahali na aongelee mambo ya nauli katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Na ndipoza Mheshimiwa Spika, sisi kama viongozi katika bunge letu hili hatujakuja hapa kusosana Mheshimiwa Spika, vile nimeona wenzangu baadha ya mwingine kuongea, mwingine anarushia matuzi. Mheshimiwa Spika, sisi wote tulipatikana hapa sio kwa sababu sisi tunafaa, lakini ni kwa sababu mambo yake Mwenyezi Mungu kupitia kwa wapigaji kura kutoka kule mashinani kuhakikisha kwamba tuko hapa, kuhakikisha kwamba tunafanya kazi ile wananchi wametutuma katika bunge hili. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, na ndio hiyo mimi humpa kongole Mheshimiwa mstaafu Moi, ule alikuwa rais wetu kwa miaka 24. Ni kwa sababu hawakusema huyu alikuwa anahitimu kiwango hiki, lakini uongozi ni ile inafaa mtu mwenye ako na hekima zake ya kuhakikisha kwamba anaweza kuwa rais, anaweza kuwa kiongozi, ama anaweza kuwa pia katibu katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, na ndipoza tukiwa katika nyumba hii Mheshimiwa Spika tumetumwa, na ndipoza mambo kama haya ya mjadala yenye imeletwa na Mheshimiwa Didmas ni jukumu letu sisi, kwa sababu tunapotoka katika mashinani sisi tunaona watu wanaumia sana. Mheshimiwa Spika, ukikuja kama eneo la Trans Nzoia Mheshimiwa Spika, ni kwa sababu ya uchumi wetu na umaskini ya watu wa Trans Nzoia County, na ndipoza unaona wengi wanatumia pikipiki. Hata hivi sasa vile ninaongea, wiki iliyopita kulikuwa na madam pamoja, mwalimu wa shule pamoja na watoto wake, wale walikuwa wanasafiri kutumia pikipiki na wakagongwa na gari ya serikali. Mheshimiwa Spika, na ndipoza ninasema lazima tukuwe na mikakati mwafaka, hata tukuwe na chopokazi la kuhakikisha kwamba usalama na usafiri katika nchi yetu ya Kenya uko sambamba, Mheshimiwa Spika. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, hata niseme watoto wetu wanapofunga mashule zao, wakitaka kusafiri kwenda shule ama wanapofungua shule zao, na ndipoza uliona hivi majuzi, Mheshimiwa Spika, kule Bungoma, ukapata kwamba watoto wetu walikuwa wanatumia matatu moja kutoka Bungoma wakielekea shuleni baada ya kutoka nyumbani, na wakapata ajali katika barabara zetu na wakapoteza maisha yao, Mheshimiwa Spika. Na hii ndio tunasema wenda ikawa nauli iliteremka chini ama nauli ilipanda, na ndipoza hao watoto wakazemezana kutumia gari moja. Na ndiposa ninasema wacha tukue na mikakati mwafaka, kwa sababu tunapoenda huko nje tunapata kwamba mabarabara zao zimetengenezwa sambamba. Siko sawa. Lakini ukikuja katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, ni kwa sababu wale wamepewa nafasi ya kuhakikisha kwamba tunataka barabara zetu sikuwe mzuri, hawatumii hiyo nafasi vilivyo, Mheshimiwa Spika. Na ndiposa unaona wabunge wenzangu wakipigana katika bunge hili, wakisema hata hazina ya CDF ipewe hawa, kwa sababu hawa wanajua kwamba barabara hii na barabara hile ingine ndio iko na shida katika sehemu zao zile wanatoka, Mheshimiwa Spika. Na ndiposa mimi nashukuru na ninasi wananchi, hata wakati mwingine magavana wale wanachakuliwa katika government wahakikishe kwamba ni wanaelewa maslaha ya watu wale wanawashughulikia katika sehemu hizo, Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nitamuunga pia, kuna mwenzangu ule alikuwa amesema kwamba Mheshimiwa Didmas akuja na mswada katika bunge hii. Na akikuja na hiyo mswada, Mheshimiwa, itakuwa ni rahisi sana, kwa sababu mwenyekiti wa uchukuzi yako hapa. Itakuwa ni rahisi sana kuangalia hizo pengo, Mheshimiwa Spika, na ndiposa tuhakikishe kwamba iko sambamba. Tukisema usafiri, wacha ikuwe usafiri. Na vile wenzangu tena wamesema matapeli, Mheshimiwa Spika, tukosi matapeli kila sekta. Sio sekta hii peke yake ndio iko na matapeli. Matapeli wanapatikana kila mahali katika nchi yetu hii ya Kenya, na lazima tukue na sisi kama wenzako pia tuchangie na tuseme asante. Na asante Mheshimiwa Spika, ninaunga mkono mjadala huu. Asante.
Honorable members, I wish to recognize the presence of students from Foothill School from Kipipiri constituency in Nyandarua County, who are in the public gallery today to witness the proceedings of this assembly. They are welcome to witness the proceedings. Honorable members, this particular motion has taken
approval that before.
Honorable members, we all acceded to this procedural requirements that a motion of this nature takes 3 hours.
Honorable Speaker.
The chair has just walked in, so the chair should have been there to second. After you may do so.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, I want to give the Honorable Kosing 2 minutes. I'll also give Honorable Mwambu Mabonga 2 minutes. And this lady, the county MP from Bungoma, another 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. And also this MP for Samis, 2 minutes.
The Honorable Didmas. The first one you are giving 2 minutes is the Honorable Chair, Kosing.
Yes.
The second one I got to
Honorable Mwambu Mabonga.
Mabonga, the Honorable Mabonga.
Then Catherine Wambilianga.
The Honorable?
Catherine Wambilianga.
Wambilianga, 1 minute.
The Honorable Mwalimu Arbel.
Very well.
Then the Honorable Bishop, another 2 minutes.
Bishop Kamala, 2 minutes. So you have done.
Yeah. That motions like this are very important, but they can be more important when they become a bill. So, Honorable Dismas Barasa, I want to ask you, Honorable colleague, please, through the Speaker, make a bill. We are also discussing in our committee, because issues of fares we cannot debate, Honorable Speaker. It is a serious issue. There is no law that regulates fares. It is only in the private sector. And being in the private sector, Honorable Speaker, we are actually leaving our Kenyans to what I may call hyenas. And because, Honorable Speaker, public transport in this country is not actually public, it is private. And we have been thinking about how to make it now public. Maybe you can make it through Honorable Dismas Barasa. But more important, Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, we are also in the ministry, I have seen proposals which are very good about commuter railway. The railway is actually the future of this country, Honorable Speaker, because then railway is 100% public. And we are going to do a lot of things that will promote this. But Honorable Dismas Barasa, I'm with you. Bring a bill and I will support you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
And actually millions of people are in the hands of very confused fellas. And it's because of our own making. We have a responsibility. This country is ailing almost in every sector. I have just 3 words, Mr. Speaker. People who were born in royal family, they may not understand what you're talking about. But for some of us who have been in this kind of life, we know, and we know what people are going through. That system is very confused, number 1. Number 2 is very chaotic. Number 3 is very barbaric. And it's so deliberate that when you talk of people being mishandled in the public sector, you can walk around, Mr. Speaker, and you will see. There is no specific picking and dropping points of the passengers. If we could have a way of just coming up, what the chair has just suggested, my brother Ditmas, come up with a bill and let us put these things in law so that people may indeed know what they're entitled for. Kenyans are really suffering in the hands of these confused fellas called doubts along our streets, along our towns. Please, we need to do something, and I'm happy for what my brother has done. We must begin somewhere. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, we are talking of corruption and fighting corruption. This is just one level of corruption that must be identified and dealt with it with immediate effect. Thanks, Mr. Barasa. Thanks, Honorable Barasa, for giving me 2 minutes to contribute on this important motion.
The Honorable Abele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for equally giving me this opportunity to contribute to this very important motion. Mr. Speaker, public transport is one sector that is widely used by Kenyans at large. And the majority of Kenyans who use these means of transport are children, elderly people, people with disability. And actually, it is very unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, if people walk to Matatu terminal walking, but it is because the fares have been made impossible for them to board Matatu to and from their destinations. For that reason, Mr. Speaker, I think it is very important to bring sanity into our roads so that public transport in the eastern regions to provide camels to come and provide transport from where all the destinations of Nairobi, from Eastlands or elsewhere to Nairobi town. At least we will be able to charge for free. Maybe that will be able to bring sanity. We will be able to bring competition alongside the Matatu industry. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Abele, that will be an interesting one. And I would urge you to be the first one to take that ride on the camel to Parliament, probably, so that you would send the message out. So probably tomorrow, hopefully. The Honorable Ambilianga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this chance, at least to balance the gender on the extra time. I first want to congratulate my brother for bringing up this motion at this timely hour. It comes at a time when the common Kenyan is actually suffering. It is the lowest cadre of Mwananchi that actually uses transport of this nature. The teachers, the doctors, the nurses, the hawkers. There's an introduction of competitive tendering for public transport, as this will bring sanity. Because as it is, when we are going to consider and say we charge fares according to maybe the need, and the need here is like when you look at the border borders, they are under pressure to pay their masters. So you find a border rushing to make as many trips and also hiking the fares so that they're able to pay their masters. The Matatu operators the same. I will quote one viral thing that has been going on, and I'm sure you have seen it. There's this Matatu driver who literally ran out of a Matatu when he was being attacked, when he was being stopped by the police. I'm sure this kind of a driver was just trying to speed up so that he does as many trips as possible so that he comes to pay his master. And at this level, if we as a house do not curb this menace, it's going to be a problem. The defined fares will also help in the sense that as anybody leaves the house, as our children leave the house in the morning, going.
The Honorable Ambilianga, you had only 2 minutes, but apparently you had a lot to say, but it is well. We shall have finally the Honorable Kamala.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank my brother, the Honorable Barasa, and I stand here to support the motion on development and implementation of regulations for management of fares charged by public service vehicles. Mr. Speaker, I represent a constituency that has Kakamega town, and all my life I have lived to use public transport, buses, the Matatus, and Mr. Speaker, it is very important that this House comes together to make sure that the chaos that are in the Matatu industry are brought to an end. Mr. Speaker, I also want you to know I used to be a preacher in the buses. I'm still a preacher, yeah, but I used to preach in the buses. I will go from Kariobangi all the way to Kibera, and I will see how many times the fares were altered.
The Honorable Kamala, coming from where you come from, probably that's why you didn't notice at the time, because you had all the time to ride from Kariobangi to Kibera. But you should continue the service also within the precincts of Parliament. I think we need it here. Yes, I'm sure you are. Honorable members, I'll direct that the necessary steps on this motion will be, yes? The mover, 1 minute, yes. The mover.
Thank you,
reply.
Mr. Speaker. I want to appreciate and thank the members who have supported this motion, and approval of this motion is going to imply that and give meaning to our national anthem, and that fares, going up of fares, increase in fares is going to be dictated by...
For consideration again on the order paper. I direct that we move to the next order.
Order number 9, motion, diagnostic testing, screening, and treatment of diabetes in workplaces and community settings.
The Honorable Rueda Obo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the following motion. That aware that the prevalence of diabetic in the country has been on the increase, with approximately 458,900 cases reported in Kenya according to the International Diabetes Federation report of 2017, representing 2% of the total adult population. Deeply concerned that many people with diabetes continue to lose their lives each year due to lack of awareness of the disease, inability to afford management of the condition, and the expensive medications. Noting that people living with disabilities, with diabetes, can live longer and lead a comfortable life, if they receive the right medication care and support to help them manage the disease. Further noting that there remains inadequate funding for the implementation of the effective strategy for the prevention, detection, and management of diabetes, thus hindering Kenya's achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal 3 and Vision 2030. Recognizing the importance of early diagnosis of diabetes aiding treatment, monitoring treatment progress, monitoring recovery, and preventing life-threatening and expensive complications. This House urged the government to institutionalize diagnostic testing for diabetes in workplace and community settings, provide for education, prevention, subsidize routine diabetes screening and treatment, and put in place measures to ensure the effective diabetes care system at all levels of health care. Mr. Speaker, this motion is close to my heart. I am representing it on behalf of every diabetic person who woke up very early in the morning to vote for me, the family who have lost their loved ones because they could not afford management of diabetes, and for every single person out there who is suffering from this disease. Honorable Speaker, the prevalence of diabetes in Kenya has been on the increase. The International Diabetes Federation reported that there are approximately 458,900 cases in Kenya, which represent 2% of the adult population. The Kenya Diabetes Management